It is the most dramatic story of the day today. It's a story that represents today's starkish clash between good and sinister, and it happened in a House Armed Services Committee meeting covered by few reporters. In that hearing, the nation's top military leader, General Mark Milley, offers a blazing rebuke of GOP disinformation and politicization of the United States military. We're going to show you Milley's remarks, which were a response to a question from alleged child sex trafficker Matt Gaetz. Here they are.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders now and in the future do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know. And I respect your service, and you and I are both Green Berets. But I want to know. And it matters to our military and the discipline and cohesion of this military.
Wow. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs there, smacking down an ugly attempt to smear the military as woke. Milley delivered a sermon on anti-racism and pro-intellectualism. It was one of the most forthright rebukes of the right wing's increasingly brazen attacks on the military, which include comments like these.
So we've got new hairstyles and maternity flight suits. Pregnant women are going to fight our wars. It's a mockery of the U.S. military.
If you're wondering whether our military leadership has gone woke, you can consider that question settled for good. The Pentagon is now the Yale faculty lounge, but with cruise missiles. And that should concern you.
Other attacks by the GOP centered on the stand down at the United States military that it took after January 6th to take stock of extremism in its own ranks, which brings us to the exchange Defense Secretary Austin had when Matt Gaetz probed him. Take a listen.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation. And so we are focused on extremist behaviors, and not ideology, not people's thoughts, not people's political orientation. Behaviors is what we're focused on. And one final point, and thanks for your anecdotal input, but I would say that I have gotten 10 times that amount of input, 50 times that amount of input on the other side that have said, hey, we're glad to have had the ability to have a conversation with ourselves and with our leadership. And that's what we need.
Joining our conversation, author and distinguished professor at Vanderbilt University, Eric Dyson. Also joining us, MSNBC contributor Tim Miller, who's a writer at large for The Bulwark and a former RNC spokesman. So, Professor, first, a good day for pushing back, a tragic day that our elected officials on one side of the aisle are using congressional hearings to push Fox News segments.
It is utterly reprehensible. But boy, at M Square, Mark Milley, General, pushed back in a poignant fashion. I've read Mao Zedong. I'm not a communist. I've read Karl Marx. I'm not a Marxist. If you read a comic book, are you a comic? The point is that this man says we should be open-minded. He encouraged them to study what critical race theory is. He knew its roots better than most of them. He knew it was rooted at Harvard Law School with the late, great Derek Bell. Of course, now Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. And all critical race theory is saying as a theory of law is that it's not about individual acts of bigotry or bias or racism. It is a systemic and institutional network that must be somehow discerned and dismantled. And what they're saying is, let's not point the finger at individual white brothers and sisters and say, aha, we caught you. Let's look at a system that produces and reproduces the pathology of bigotry. Isn't this what we've been saying after George Floyd? We don't want to just point the finger at Derek Chauvin as an individual. We want to talk about police forces which recreate the same pathogen that is unleashed in the body politic. So again, the deliberate misunderstanding of critical race theory, and by the way, ain't no problem with being woke. It's better than being asleep at the wheel, as so many of these conservatives have been. Let's all be awake. Let's all be sensitive to and alive to the differences, the virtues, the values, the contradictions, and the disagreements that we have so that we can arrive at an understanding of what democracy is. But what he did today was so extremely important. And even giving Matt Gaetz credit, you know, as a Green Beret, he says, I am as well. And I find it offensive that you would try to impugn the integrity of the military with this attempt to smear them. It was a remarkable defense of open-mindedness and free thinking in America, which ostensibly is the right and prerogative and the bully pulpit of the right wing that so often tries to undermine it.
You're making me want to rewind it and play it again. I'm gonna ask them to do that. I want to follow up with you, Professor, on one more thing. I mean, he talks about white rage, and he says, I want to understand white rage, and I'm a white guy. Right. Plus one, but by the way, I do too. But he makes a really important point. He says, I want to understand why thousands of them stormed this building.
Right.
And I want to understand why white rage drove them to overthrow the Constitution. I mean, I think what he didn't say was, why don't you?
Right. No. Well, it was implicit. You know, if people are intelligent enough, let he who has ears hear. So the point is, or she who has ears hear. So the reality is that, yes, why don't we want to understand white rage? Because we saw it in action. As Secretary Austin said, it's not about ideological contestation or battling over interpretation. It's about action. So he removed it from the sphere of if it's right wing or left wing. Look at the manifestation of the rage that was out of control, the rage that led people to hurt police officers. The right wing, the conservative junta, is often speaking about love and appreciation for, officers of the peace who keep the peace, officers of this United States of America who stand with the backing of the Constitution to protect, to preserve the comity of this nation. And yet these people can't even protect these police officers, nor can they impanel a commission to try to study it. So they're not interested or curious about that white rage, because that white rage is boiling in their blood. It's overflowing in the coffers of the American Senate and the United States Congress. And unfortunately, people like, General Milley are too often too rare in this society to say, let's just, out of a sense of compassionate curiosity about our fellow citizens, try to understand what drove them to such lunatic fringe behavior, as Seymour Lipset would call it, to suggest that we need to take serious inventory of what's going on in our nation. And again, it's been so deeply politicized that we can't even have common sense.